Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. Today we had many interesting articles from the international edition of the Hindu. So I have chosen the international edition for today's analysis. I have chosen six important articles from the international edition. We have 4 major columns and articles relevant for the mains exam and 2 small articles that are important for the prelims examination. So let's analyze these articles one by one in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from the daily Hindu analysis, do let us know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. Before we start, we have a very important announcement. As you know, Conquer Prelims Crash Course is going on both on our YouTube channel and as well as on the Unacademy app. On the Unacademy app, the static phase of the crash course has been going on from April 19th. And today, Abhishek sir will be taking up the next history session at 6 p.m. live on the Unacademy app. And as part of the current affairs part of the crash course, which has started on our YouTube channel, today evening I shall be taking the second session for international relations at 7:30 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. The best way to access these classes would be to join our Telegram channel, because right before the session goes live, we share the links directly in our Telegram channel. You just have to click and watch these sessions. So if you're preparing seriously for the upcoming prelims, or even if you're a 2025 aspirant, please attend these crash course sessions, because this is the best, most effective and easiest way for you to prepare for the topics of the last 18 months, be it the current affairs topics and the most important static topics. So do ensure that you use the crash course to the full benefit, and do let us know what you think in the comments about our initiatives. And before I start, don't forget that our online classroom program is going on a full-fledged scale, and a new batch is starting from today. A new English online classroom program is going to begin from today, and Unacademy is providing a special offer to ensure that the courses are affordable to all the aspirants. Our courses, which are usually priced at around 75,000, has been dropped to just 25,000 for a limited time period, and today is the last day of the offer. The offer ends today. It was provided as part of Unacademy Manzil, where we felicitated our 2023 toppers, and to mark their success, the price drop had been provided by Unacademy. So to ensure that you avail the offer and enroll for the classroom program, which is starting from today. So with this, let's get started with the discussion and look at the first article from page number 1 of the international edition. We have a very important update regarding the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. It has been reported that Hamas has apparently agreed to a ceasefire with mediating countries such as Qatar and Egypt. That's what the news report says, and it becomes very important to examine and analyze this development. As you all know, around 7 months ago, Hamas, which is a notorious Palestinian extremist outfit that operates in the Gaza Strip, carried out a deadly attack against Israel on October 7th. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas carried out a deadly attack against Israel and killed more than 1,000 Israelis. Apart from causing large-scale devastation, Hamas had even captured around 200 Israeli hostages. Close to 200 Israelis were kidnapped by Hamas extremists, and they were taken into Gaza and they were held as hostages by Hamas. It was this deadly attack that pushed Israel to launch a full-out war in Gaza to target Hamas with the goal of eliminating Hamas. Since then, Israel has been accused of using disproportionate force even in civilian areas. Israel has almost demolished the whole of Gaza Strip, and more than 34,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed in the ongoing Gaza conflict. Lakhs of Palestinians have been injured, including young children. It has led to allegations that Israel is committing war crimes and a genocide. It has even been dragged to the International Court of Justice by South Africa on the charges of committing a genocide against Palestinians. Essentially, this conflict which has been dragging on has not just affected the people of Palestine, Israel, but it has consumed the whole West Asia region. So over the months, several regional powers and global powers have been trying to negotiate a ceasefire to achieve a temporary halt to the conflict, to at least provide for a humanitarian pause. Because Israel has been using brutal tactics to block even the delivery of aid and assistance to Palestinians. This has been a cause for concern. Many countries have been critical of Israel's approach, including India. So now, it's been reported that Qatar and Egypt, the two major regional powers which have a stake in this conflict, apparently they have mediated with Hamas and Israel, and Hamas has apparently accepted a ceasefire deal. Again, these are not confirmed, absolutely confirmed reports. The reports are saying that Hamas has agreed to the deal. It's still not clear whether will Israel accept this. Also, the terms of the deal, the exact terms of the deal is still not very clear. So first, let's understand what has Qatar got to do with the Gaza conflict. What's Egypt doing with regard to the Gaza conflict? Let's understand the role of these regional powers and why are they acting as mediators between Israel and Hamas. See, Egypt, which is located over here, it not only occupies a strategic location along the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, right, but it also is connected to the West Asia region through the Sinai Peninsula, through the Sinai Desert that you can see over here. Egypt's control over the Suez Canal makes Egypt a vital power in the region, and it is seen as a powerful, influential country, reasonably moderate country as well, which has stakes in the ongoing conflict over here in the Gaza Strip. Because when Israel established itself in 1948 by unilaterally declaring independence, by violating the two-state plan, several Arab countries here, they rejected the establishment of Israel and they declared war against Israel. And Egypt was one amongst them. Egypt fought a war against Israel back in 1948 along with other Arab powers. And briefly, Egypt had even captured what is today's Gaza Strip. So today's Gaza Strip was largely under Egyptian control for many years, from 1948 to 1967. It was only during the Six-Day War of 1967 that Israel recaptured these Palestinian territories from Egypt. And later, as Egypt suffered a defeat in the 1967 war, then Egypt was forced to establish a peaceful relationship with Israel by recognizing Israel. In 1979, the Camp David Accords were signed between Egypt and Israel, where Egypt recognized Israel and established relations with Israel, and in return, Israel gave back the Sinai Peninsula, the Sinai Desert, which had been captured by Israel. So since then, Egypt has maintained good relations with Israel, and it also has ties with Gaza Strip, with the Palestinians in Gaza. Because there is one crossing point from Gaza to Egypt, the Rafah border crossing, which has been in the news frequently as well. This is the only border crossing for Palestinians apart from entering Israel. Since Israel has blockaded Gaza and almost turned Gaza into an open-air prison by blockading Gaza from all the sides, the only other route for Palestinians to connect with outside world is the Rafah border crossing present over here in the Sinai Desert in Egypt. So that is what makes Egypt a stakeholder as far as what's happening in Gaza is concerned. Because in the Mediterranean, Israel has imposed a naval blockade since Hamas took control of Gaza Strip in 2006. Across the land border here, Israel has completely barricaded Gaza Strip and blocked out Gaza Strip. It has restricted access and connectivity. So if, let's say, such a war or conflict were to occur, the only escape route for Palestinians is to assemble at Rafah crossing and hope that Egypt allows them onto the other side. If medical assistance or relief material has to be sent to the people of Gaza, the only available route has been the Rafah border crossing, as most likely Israel places a blockade around the Gaza Strip. This has been the case over the last 15-20 years. So Egypt becomes a stakeholder in the conflict because of this history, because of Egyptian involvement in the affairs of Gaza and Egypt's former war or previous war against Israel. The eventual peaceful relations that developed between Egypt and Israel makes Egypt a stakeholder in whatever happens in Gaza. So ever since the Gaza war broke out last year, Egyptian intelligence agencies have been playing a very big role in negotiating between Hamas and Israel to try and achieve a settlement, to try and achieve a ceasefire. Because if the war continues, if the pressure in Gaza continues, right, and if Palestinians are completely assembled here near Rafah crossing, millions of them, then Egypt will pay the price eventually if Palestinians are forced to cross over into Egypt. As of now, Egypt has blocked the route. Egypt has not taken in any Palestinian refugees. But if it were to happen, if the war were to escalate and continue, and if Israel were to attack Rafah border crossing as well, where millions of Palestinians are today cornered by Israel, it will push the Palestinian refugees into Egypt. So that would be a worst case scenario for Egypt as well. And Egypt wouldn't want that situation. So Egypt would desire for peace and stability. It would want an end to this conflict. So as of now, the primary issue between Israel and Hamas happens to be the question of hostages. See, Israel went to war not just to avenge the terror attack that had happened on October 7th, but Israel swore to decimate Hamas, to completely dismantle this extremist outfit. Israel's primary goal was to secure the safe release of the hostages, close to 200 of them, who had been kidnapped by Hamas extremists. So over the last 7 months, during the course of the conflict, several hostages have been killed. Some of them have been killed by Hamas. Some of them might have been killed by Israeli attacks as well, accidentally, right? And some of them have been returned when brief ceasefires were worked out in the last few months. But still, Hamas holds on to several Israeli hostages. So right now, for Netanyahu's government, a priority is to secure the safe release of these hostages. On the other hand, for Hamas, the priority as of now is to ensure that there is a ceasefire and there is some relief from this war, which has destroyed Gaza and ravaged the Palestinian people. So both sides have a certain demand that needs to be fulfilled. And if it is likely achieved, there might be a viable ceasefire, at least for the time being. But however, reports from Israel indicate that Israel is rejecting any such negotiations. Netanyahu especially, who has taken a very extreme position, has rejected any call for a ceasefire and has stated that Israel will continue the war no matter what, as Israel's goal is to wipe out Hamas and then secure the hostages. It basically means Israel is even ready to risk the lives of the remaining hostages if the goal is to eliminate Hamas completely and ensure that Hamas never strikes back. So this has led to a lot of global pressure as well, because right now what Israel has done, it has bombed north and central Gaza extensively, conducted extensive military raids, and has pushed the 2.3 million Gaza population towards the Rafah border crossing. So majority of Palestinians are cornered here in this neighborhood between Rafah and Khan Yunis. So there is a grave humanitarian situation which has developed here. There is critical shortage of medical supplies, critical shortage of food and water, and yet Israel is not allowing for humanitarian aid and assistance to be provided. So global agencies and even other countries like US, they have either tried delivering aid directly by airdropping it, or they are trying to push whatever aid is possible through the Rafah border crossing with the help of Egypt. So that remains the situation here. And in such a difficult situation, Israel has been stating that it's going to launch a full-fledged assault near Rafah border crossing. In the last few weeks, there have been reports that there is an imminent attack from Israel near Rafah border crossing because it wants to wipe out Hamas, because according to Israel, this is where Hamas militants are hiding. This is their final hideout, because most of the hideouts have been destroyed in north and central Gaza. Now, global powers are urging Israel, they're demanding Israel to not attack Rafah crossing because more than 1.5 million Palestinians are cornered here. If such a war were to break out here, it would lead to a catastrophic damage to civilian population, and hence there is tremendous pressure on Israel to not attack the Rafah border crossing. That is the reason why Egypt has accelerated the negotiations. Its intelligence agencies are working with Hamas leadership, right? And they are working with Qatar and other players in the region to try and find a temporary solution at least. Now, the next question you might ask is, what is Qatar doing here? Qatar is actually located a little far away from the region. So what's Qatar's interest here? Right? We understood what's Egypt's interest, but what's Qatar's interest in this? See, Hamas, as you know, has been funded, sponsored by Iran and Syria primarily. These Shia powers led by Iran, they have been the primary sponsors of this extremist outfit called Hamas that operates in the Gaza Strip. So Iran, which is a rival of Israel, which also has rivalries with Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia, has been the primary sponsor as the leading Shia power. Iran, along with Syria and even Lebanon to an extent, they have been sponsoring Hamas over the decades. So Qatar in between has emerged as a major regional power. Between the Shia-Sunni divide, led by Iran and Saudi Arabia, respectively, Qatar has propped itself as one of the key regional powers which has major stakes in this geopolitical conflict. On one hand, Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia have been waging a covert war against the Shia power bloc led by Iran. So the power bloc led by Iran has been countering this campaign by targeting the Sunni powers and by targeting Israel and targeting American interests. So that has been the regional divide here, with Iran on one side, along with its allies like Syria and Lebanon, and Israel, US, and the Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia on the other side. So this has been a geopolitical divide. So in between this divide, Qatar has projected itself as a major regional power, and it has been involved in working with various extremist groups. It has even been accused of sponsoring few extremist organizations to retain its unique influence in the region. In fact, recently, a few years ago, a divide came up within the Sunni power bloc, because Qatar also happens to be a Sunni country. It is led by a Sunni monarchy. But a divide came up within the Sunni power bloc where the Gulf cooperation countries, the GCC countries, led by Saudi Arabia, they boycotted Qatar. Saudi Arabia urged others as well, like UAE, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain, to boycott Qatar and to cut off relations with Qatar, because according to Saudi Arabia, Qatar was involved in sponsoring extremist groups like Hamas and other groups as well, which threaten the interests of the Sunni countries. Qatar had been removed, in a way, from the GCC. It had been boycotted. A diplomatic blockade had been placed on it. But recently, things have normalized. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have addressed their differences. They have restored the normal relations. But the fact is, Qatar has been playing a very big role in the regional geopolitics. It hosted the Taliban leadership from Afghanistan. It offered Doha as a negotiating ground for US when it was negotiating with the Taliban leadership, right? When US struck a deal with Taliban in 2021 and eventually decided to withdraw the troops and quit Afghanistan, this deal was secured with the help of Qatar. The agreement, the US-Taliban peace agreement, is even called the Doha Agreement because it was negotiated in Doha, the capital of Qatar. That shows the significant influence Qatar exercises in the geopolitics of the region. It gave a place for the Talibani leadership. The political leadership of Taliban was hosted at Doha, and Qatar acted as a mediator between US and Taliban. So similarly, Qatar is playing a mediating role even now, because the leadership of Hamas, the central leadership, is hosted by the Qatari government. The top leaders of Hamas, including Ismail Haniyeh, the top commander of Hamas, they are hosted in Qatar. They are secured by the Qatari government. And Qatar is using that unique position to act as a mediator to find solutions for these regional issues. So the intelligence agencies of Qatar and Egypt are directly involved in the ongoing mediation. And apparently they have convinced Hamas to accept the ceasefire deal. According to reports, the ceasefire deal would include Hamas releasing all the hostages, all the Israeli hostages, and in return, Israel halting the war in Gaza. But as of now, Israel has rejected any possible ceasefire. The US is still trying to understand the terms of the deal. US was largely kept out of these negotiations. The US is trying to find out as to what exactly are the terms of the deal. But US is pressurizing Israel to not target Rafah border crossing. Not just US, the whole global community, led by United Nations, they're pressurizing Israel to not target the Rafah crossing because there are more than 1 million innocent people who are trapped in this region. If Israel were to launch this final assault here in the name of targeting Hamas, it will end up committing a humanitarian tragedy. So to avoid that, most countries are correctly putting pressure on Israel, trying to push Israel away from launching this attack. So this ceasefire announcement could be a huge breakthrough. If it works out, if other countries can push Israel to accept the deal, it appears to be a fair enough deal because Israel will get back all the remaining hostages alive, safe, and in return, the Gaza war can come to an end. And there are reports suggesting that this could even bring a permanent end to the conflict. It may not just be a temporary ceasefire. This could permanently end the ongoing war and bring some stability back into this region. So that is why this is one of the biggest developments to come with regard to the Gaza war in the recent months. So it's a developing story. We need to track this regularly because whatever happens here has a direct impact on India. We have studied through previous sessions how the Gaza war has impacted India. India would be closely watching all these developments as well, and hence the topic becomes very, very important. Now let's look at the next article on page number 10. We have a detailed article on the topic of carbon farming. It's a very important concept that you need to understand with regard to environment and ecology. It can be relevant for both for prelims and even for your mains. You should know what is carbon farming. The article explains what is carbon farming. It talks about the advantages of carbon farming, how we can mitigate climate change through this technique called carbon farming. The article is also detailing the different types, the different techniques of carbon farming that exist. It's also talking about the challenges and the opportunities available for countries like India. It's also providing us a global context, giving us examples of global farming projects around the world. So there are some very interesting details in this article. So let's take a detailed look at this particular column from page number 10. So first, let's understand the role of carbon in our environment. I'm sure all of you would have studied the carbon cycle since your school days. Even your basic NCERT textbook talks about the carbon cycle, right? It's one of the fundamental elements, right? You would have studied these biogeochemical cycles that talks about nutrient circulation between the organic and inorganic world. So amongst all the nutrients and elements, carbon is one of the most fundamental elements, be it for plants, for animals, and even for the inorganic matter. Carbon is absolutely a building block. For example, look at photosynthesis. Look at the process of respiration. Look at the entire process of decaying, the process of creation of fossil fuels, the role of carbon in the atmosphere, the presence of carbon in the soil itself, presence of carbon in our water bodies, right? Carbon is everywhere. Carbon is a fundamental building block of nature. So this carbon is being circulated in our environment. It passes through organic and inorganic world, that is between the plants and animals and the soil, water, and the atmosphere. There is a constant circulation which is happening, right? Naturally, there is an equilibrium that is maintained in this cycle. So there is a certain amount of carbon stored in our soil system, certain amount of carbon stored in the organic matter, that is the plants, including all the living organisms. In the decaying matter, a lot of carbon is stored. This carbon gets locked away for the long term, which eventually turns into your fossil fuels. Then you also have carbon in the seas, in the oceans. You have carbon in the atmosphere, which is naturally present, which is necessary for the natural process of global warming, which helps in maintaining an ideal temperature, which makes life possible on Earth. But due to anthropogenic activities, we have disrupted this natural carbon cycle. Because of human intervention, we have disrupted these natural processes. For example, we have deforested our forest areas. We have cut down the trees, the grasslands, right? We have destroyed the forests to clear way for farming, for urbanization, industrialization. And thus we have destroyed the natural carbon sinks. These are natural areas that store carbon, right? We call them carbon sinks, which can hold massive quantities of carbon for the long term. But these carbon sinks have been destroyed. We have extracted the deposited fossil fuels from millions of years ago and burnt these fossil fuels at a rapid rate for industrial activity, for transportation, right? We have burned fossil fuels at a massive rate, releasing all the locked up carbon into the atmosphere at an accelerated rate. So this is what increased the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which triggered the process of global warming, the human-induced process of global warming. So naturally, process of global warming is essential, it's necessary. That's why life exists on Earth, because the ideal concentration of greenhouse gases, primarily led by carbon dioxide, methane, etc., provides for the ideal temperature that we have on Earth, which makes life possible on Earth. But because of the interruption caused by human activities, large-scale deforestation, the large-scale agriculture, right, unsustainable agriculture, where we till the farming land, it could release the carbon from the soil. Large-scale livestock cultivation contributes methane emissions, right? It contributes directly to carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. The extraction of fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels at a massive rate in the last 2 centuries has released extensive greenhouse gas emissions. So we have increased the concentration of greenhouse gases over the last 2 centuries, which today is accelerating global warming, right? So this is leading to climate change, where the climatological processes are undergoing a change, leading to extreme weather events. Now, since agriculture could be a primary contributor for climate change, can we find a solution in agriculture to mitigate climate change? That is the question. Can we make agriculture, farming more sustainable? Can we increase the carbon sink to increase carbon sequestration? The process of carbon sequestration is about absorbing the excess carbon, excess greenhouse gases, locking it away in the natural processes, in the natural cycle. So there are many strategies that can be employed when it comes to carbon sequestration. But one very popular method which is being advocated is the method called carbon farming. See, we all know farming is about cultivation, right? In farming, we grow crops, we provide for various food grains, vegetables, fruits, etc., right? It takes care of our food security. So can you use farming methods to manage carbon levels in the nature? Can we ensure we absorb the excess carbon from the atmosphere, lock more carbon in the soil, in the plants, and in other natural systems, so that we can naturally mitigate the impact of climate change? So this is where carbon farming comes in. Essentially, it's a combination of carbon sequestration with your regular farming practices. Through better sustainable agricultural practices and farming methods, you can lock away more carbon. You can absorb more carbon from the atmosphere, sequester that, and trap it away in the plants, within the food chain, and in the soil system and water systems, so that we can reduce the concentration of greenhouse gases. This helps in mitigating the impact of climate change. So that is the concept of carbon farming. Carbon farming is about combining the two concepts of agricultural farming and carbon sequestration and promoting sustainable agricultural practices, so that within the farmland, the emissions can be reduced, plus excess carbon can be absorbed from the atmosphere and locked away in the food chain itself, or in the soil, or in the water system. So that way carbon is sequestered away for the long term, and it could help in mitigating the impact of climate change. So there are many different techniques under carbon farming. It can be practiced depending on the location, depending on the agroclimatic zones of different regions and different countries. So let's examine what are the different types of farming methods, farming techniques that are present, which are seen as examples of carbon farming. The article talks about different practices, including more sustainable methods of grazing, methods of agroforestry, better livestock management. So there are many different methods and techniques through which more carbon can be absorbed and it can be locked away in the carbon sinks. There are efficient, sustainable methods of farming through which the new emissions can be minimized. Emissions from livestock, emissions from various crop cultivation can be reduced. Deforestation can be minimized. Thus, the idea here is to ensure that carbon emissions from agriculture is minimized, mitigated, while we lock away more and more carbon into the carbon sinks. So this method is essentially carbon farming. It's a sustainable agricultural method using different techniques and practices, which is aiming to reduce the emissions from agriculture and also aiming to lock away more carbon into the carbon sinks. Is that clear? So it basically has two primary objectives. One is to mitigate farm emissions. As we understood, agriculture contributes to emissions. So with better sustainable methods of farming, you can mitigate the farm emissions, the emissions being released due to agricultural activities. And the second objective of carbon farming, the second objective is to lock more carbon in the carbon sinks, to lock away more carbon in the carbon sinks, in the soil, in the food chain, in the water bodies, so that the excess carbon can be removed and it can help in tackling the impact of climate change. So these sustainable agricultural methods, which can be used as part of your farming, right? They are called techniques of carbon farming. So let's understand the different techniques which are seen as helpful in carbon farming. One method is agroforestry. If you remember, recently we had studied agroforestry in detail. It's the practice of cultivating trees within the farmland. Let's say certain crops are being cultivated within the farmland, within the agricultural land. A forest patch is also grown. In between trees, hard wooded trees will be cultivated, which can help in increasing the tree cover. It can help in restoring the soil fertility, arrest land degradation. It can provide additional income as well to the farmers. So agroforestry is a very sustainable method to restore the ecosystem, to restore soil fertility, and also to help create additional sources of income for the farmers. The trees which are grown here, right, they will have some produce which could be beneficial commercially, and farmers can benefit from that and increase their agricultural income. So under agroforestry, you have techniques like silvopasture, for example. Silvopasture is a practice where in the grazing lands where you graze the cattle, trees are grown. Trees are cultivated in grazing lands to protect the soil fertility, to prevent land degradation. Even farming or cropping can be practiced in grazing lands. You combine your livestock management with your farming methods. Because when cattle graze on the same patch of land, right, when they eat away all the grass, the small plants and shrubs, it could weaken the top layer of the soil and subject the top layer of the soil to erosion, which could degrade the soil, which could release more carbon as well, right? And it could lead to land degradation in the long term. So one way to protect the grazing land is to practice such methods where trees are grown or farming is integrated into the grazing land itself, so that these crops, these trees which are standing there as part of silvopasture, they can protect the soil system and they can contribute to increased absorption of carbon from the atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis. Then you also have techniques like alley cropping, where between farmlands, an entire row of trees are planted, like a street, like an alley, right? These are all agroforestry practices. They help in removing carbon, storing it in these hard wooded trees, shrubs, which can survive for decades and maybe much more than that. There are trees which can survive more than 100 years, right? So you essentially lock away carbon for the long term by promoting agroforestry within the farmland. There are very efficient agricultural practices which are more sustainable. For example, zero tillage cropping. You might have seen in rural areas, farmers till the land before they sow the crops, right? Tilling is a regular farming practice. It brings up the fertile soil to the top layer. It reorganizes the presence of organic matter which is needed for the plant growth. So tilling is seen as an essential practice in farming. But problem is excessive tilling leads to the release of carbon which is locked in the soil. This is not sustainable from a climate change point of view. More tilling will lead to release of carbon locked in the soil system, contributing to climate change. So one sustainable method here is to ensure that there is zero tillage, that the top layer of the soil is not disturbed. So there are organic methods of farming available where crops can be sown without tilling the soil, without disturbing the soil, which does not release the carbon. So that way you're reducing the emissions. Crop rotation, right? This is something you would have studied in geography as well. Rotating the crops over a piece of land will help in restoring soil fertility. It will reduce the need for fertilizers. It will protect the productivity of the land, and eventually it will contribute to reduction in emissions. It will increase the productivity, meaning more carbon can be trapped in the plants and in the crops that can be grown. There are similar methods like crop residue management, cover cropping, for example. Right? These are different sustainable agricultural techniques that can either reduce emissions or can lock more emissions or carbon in the soil itself or in the plants itself. So these are some methods that are suggested under carbon farming. Crop residue management is about minimizing the crop runoff using minimal fertilizers and pesticides, minimizing the runoff so that it doesn't contribute to adverse consequences on the environment which could further release emissions. So managing the crop residue is also a sustainable agricultural practice. Then integrated nutrient management, relying more on organic manure, organic fertilizers, instead of chemical-based fertilizers and pesticides, which are extremely harmful for the soil system and for the water bodies as well. So this will not only lead to environment conservation, it will make farming more sustainable, more climate friendly, reduce the carbon emissions. It will help in trapping more carbon within the farmland, within the soil, and thus it will help in mitigating the impact of climate change. So other methods like crop diversification, intercropping, right? All these methods are good for protecting the quality of the land, for protecting the fertility of the soil. These methods will help in carbon farming as well. It will ensure less carbon is released from agriculture and more carbon is trapped within the farmland. Better livestock management, especially the ruminant category of cattle, right, which regurgitate their food, which contributes to large-scale methane emissions. The animal husbandry industry in itself is one of the leading contributors for methane emissions. And I hope you know methane is much more potent than carbon dioxide. As a greenhouse gas, methane has a much higher global warming potential. Methane has a much higher global warming potential than CO2. So managing emissions from the livestock, from animal husbandry is very crucial. This can be done by introducing a better food, a better feed that can contribute to reduced emissions from the cattle and the livestock, right? You can manage the animal waste, the cow dung, the animal manure in a more scientific, efficient manner, which can bring down the emissions, which can lock away the carbon for the long term. So all these methods practiced within a farmland, which are climate friendly, they are all part of carbon farming. Basically, they will help you reduce the emissions, which otherwise is released from agriculture. It could also help you in locking more carbon away into the carbon sinks that can help us mitigate the impact of climate change. So this essentially is carbon farming. Now, what are the challenges here? There are different challenges to practice these techniques because they are dependent on the location where you are practicing carbon farming. The soil condition, the extent of rainfall that is received, the irrigation that's available, all these factors which are specific to different agroclimatic zones and different geographical areas they will determine whether carbon farming is viable or not. According to experts, carbon farming is best practiced in those regions which receive good rains, which have good irrigation. Because to sustain all these practices, right, these farming methods, you need the availability of water. Water availability is absolutely critical for carbon farming. So experts say that those farmlands which are larger in size, where there is sufficient rainfall being received in the area, where there is substantial irrigation, these farmlands are best suited for carbon farming. And especially if you are focusing on the long cropping season, those crops which produce the harvest 6-8 months down the line, right, compared to short-term crops, they have a better ability to lock away more carbon within the soil system, within the plants, thus creating more carbon sinks. So on the other hand, if there are farming areas which are arid, which are dry, which don't have enough water availability, those regions are not conducive for carbon farming. Is that clear? To grow agroforestry, for example, to grow the hard wooded trees, they will need a lot of water. To grow crops which are, let's say, short-term crops, they will rely on more water supply, on irrigation. So it is not sustainable in areas which are already dry or arid or semi-arid. Or even in small patches of land, when let's say farmers are holding on to very small pieces of land, where if let's say land holding is highly fragmented in a certain area, in such regions, carbon farming may not be very effective. You might try, you might practice the method, but it may not give the desired results. Because without adequate water, you can't focus on crops, you can't focus on agroforestry, right? And in areas where there is water shortage, especially in arid regions, the usage of water will be prioritized for drinking purposes, for cleaning and washing purposes, compared to agroforestry initiatives. So that becomes a constraint. So depending on the geographical location and the agroclimatic zones, carbon farming can be practiced, or sometimes it is not suitable. So this is what has to be identified by governments. The governments have to conduct enough studies to figure out which regions are more ideal for carbon farming and where carbon farming is not suitable. This understanding is very essential if we have to scale up carbon farming as a climate mitigation strategy. Now, if you look at other countries, if you look at other global examples, there are few countries which are already promoting carbon farming, and they have already created an incentive structure, a market-linked incentive system to incentivize the farmers so that they will gain additional income if they promote carbon farming. Now, for example, look at United States. In the US, the Chicago Climate Exchange has been operating. Just like you have a stock exchange, in Chicago there's a climate exchange which is trading in carbon credits. So farmers who practice carbon farming can earn carbon credits, trade them in these exchanges, in these markets, and this becomes a financial incentive for them. You need to incentivize the farmers to focus on carbon farming. They should have a direct financial benefit, right? Or else why will farmers take it up? There are other countries as well which have tried this model. Australia, for example, New Zealand, Canada, they all have created market-linked incentive system where farmers who can practice carbon farming can get rewarded with financial incentives. Australia has launched the Carbon Farming Initiative. Please make a note of this. There can be a prelims question as well. Under Carbon Farming Initiative, Australia is linking the carbon credits earned by farmers through carbon farming methods, and it is generating viable financial incentives for those farmers. Even Canada and New Zealand are trying out these models. In Kenya, in the African country of Kenya, the Agricultural Carbon Project, which has been launched with the assistance of World Bank, it's a World Bank funded initiative. The World Bank has funded the Agricultural Carbon Project in Kenya, which is also creating an incentive model for Kenyan farmers, and if they practice carbon farming, if they reduce the emissions from their farming land, they will be rewarded with financial incentives. So such policies are necessary, such incentives are necessary. There should be community support from the local community. There should be support from the local governments. And more importantly, there should be support from the national and state governments. There should be adequate policy support, financial support. The agricultural inputs can be provided by the government to sustain such methods of carbon farming. There is an initiative called 4 per 1000 initiative. I don't know if you have heard about this. It's actually a very important point, I believe, for your prelims as well. This initiative was launched during the Paris Climate Change Summit, during COP21. When the Conference of Parties 21 was held in Paris, when the Paris Agreement was finalized, the French government, which was hosting the Climate Change Convention, launched this initiative called 4 per 1000 initiative. It's a soil conservation initiative through sustainable farming methods. As per the initiative, it's been claimed that if you can increase soil carbon by 0.4% per year worldwide, this will directly result in an offsetting of CO2 emissions that we are contributing through fossil fuel burning. The total fossil fuel emissions, right, it can be offset, it can be basically neutralized if we can increase soil carbon by 0.4% in a given year. Essentially, if we can trap more carbon in the soil, maintain more carbon levels within the soil by practicing sustainable farming methods and agricultural methods, it could help us offset the fossil fuel emissions according to 4 per 1000 initiative. So there are few examples available in the world which shows that carbon farming can be supported, it can become a success. It can reduce emissions from agriculture, it can lock away more carbon into the carbon sinks. But in countries like India, there will be a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. You need to understand both sides of the argument here. In a developing country like India, right, farmers are already operating on a very small scale. Most of the farmland in India is fragmented, right? Farmland has been broken into small patches. It's owned by a large population of the country in our rural areas. They may lack the resources, the scientific inputs that are needed to support such methods of farming and such techniques of agriculture. So this is where the government has to play a very proactive role. The policy of the government plays a critical role, and local support at the community level, at the grassroots level, plays a critical role. If this can be arranged with an incentive model, we can experiment with carbon farming in India as well, especially in the well-irrigated areas of Indo-Gangetic plains. Even in the Deccan Plateau, in the peninsular region, where we have the peninsular rivers. As I told you, carbon farming is best suited in those areas which have adequate irrigation, which receive adequate rainfall. So UPSC might ask you a prelims question. Which region of India is the most suited for carbon farming? And few options will be given. So Indo-Gangetic plain, which has perennial rivers fed by the Himalayan glaciers, they are the most suited. This region is the most suited. Next would be Deccan Plateau, because of the peninsular rivers and the monsoon rains that it receives. But however, the coastal plains of India and the Himalayan belt, they are not ideal, they are not conducive, because they don't have the ideal conditions for carbon farming. If you look at the coastal plains, for example, the problem is excessive salination. Excessive saline content will be a detrimental factor. In the Himalayas, the mountainous terrain will make carbon farming very difficult to achieve. So these regions are not well suited for carbon farming, but Indo-Gangetic plains followed by Deccan Plateau, they are the best suited for carbon farming in India. So all we need is policy support from the government, scientific inputs from the government, and local grassroots support from the community level, from the local governments. There should be an incentive model, a carbon credit based system which can financially incentivize our farmers. So this is what we learn from this important article. So there are challenges for India, but opportunities also exist. By promoting carbon farming, right, we will not only practice more sustainable agriculture, but it will reduce the emissions from farmland. It will help in trapping more carbon within the farmland, within the carbon sinks, thus mitigating the impact of climate change. So So that's what we take away from this important column. Now let's look at an important editorial from page number 8. This editorial is dealing with the Mullaperiyar Dam dispute between Kerala and Tamil Nadu. I'm sure you know where Mullaperiyar Dam is located. Be familiar with its location. You should know the history of the Mullaperiyar Dam as well, because the ongoing dispute between Kerala and Tamil Nadu is linked to the history of the dam. See, Mullaperiyar is located in the state of Kerala. It's in the Idukki district of Kerala within the Periyar National Park and Tiger Reserve. All right, you can see clearly in the map where the Mullaperiyar Dam has been built. It's been built across the Periyar River. The Periyar River is a west-flowing river, one of the major rivers in Kerala. Now, let's look at the history of the Mullaperiyar Dam. Why is this a dispute between Kerala and Tamil Nadu? See, this dam has come up at the confluence of the Mullaperiyar and Periyar rivers. Mullaperiyar is in fact one of the tributaries of the main Periyar river. It is a west-flowing river. So in the Cardamom Hills region of Western Ghats, at the confluence point of the Mullaperiyar and Periyar river, a dam was built during the British era. The construction started in 1870s, and this dam project was completed by 1895. So this dam is more than 100 years old. It's around 129 years old. It's one of the oldest dams, operational dams in India, by the way. So when it was built during the British era, it was built as a masonry gravity dam. Essentially, it has been built with very loose material and loose foundation using bricks, soil and limestone. So there is no concrete which has been used. There is no reinforcement which has been provided, which provides strength to the safety of the dam. So this old dam has been a source of controversy because one is the question of safety of this old dam. Next is about operational aspects of the dam and the projects related to the dam. Because the dam is located in Kerala. It's within the Periyar National Park. It clearly comes under the territorial jurisdiction of Kerala state government. But however, it is maintained and operated by the Tamil Nadu government. Because the British, they had signed a lease, almost a 1,000-year lease, a 999-year lease, which gave the Tamil Nadu government the operational control over the Mullaperiyar Dam. This dam was primarily built to divert waters of Periyar and provide water for the rain shadow areas of Tamil Nadu. You would have studied in geography again that there is a rain shadow area in Tamil Nadu, the Theni district, for example, the Madurai region. Right, this entire belt in Tamil Nadu is a rain shadow area, doesn't receive enough rainfall during the monsoon season. It gets some rainfall only during the retreating monsoons, during the northeast monsoons. So, to provide water for the rain shadow region in this part of Tamil Nadu, the dam had been built to divert the waters of the Periyar and supply waters to Theni over here. The Theni district, Madurai and other regions present here in the rain shadow area in Tamil Nadu. So post-independence, this dam has always been a source of controversy. The controversy is that Tamil Nadu is operating the dam. Tamil Nadu wants to increase the height of the dam. It wants to manage the way it wants. Kerala is concerned about the safety. Since it's a very old dam built with very rudimentary materials and a rudimentary structure, there is a possibility that the dam could breach, especially during heavy rainfall. Right, if the dam breaches, it can cause a devastating flood leading to a massive disaster in the region. In fact, Kerala government has already linked some of the floods and landslides in the region with the Mullaperiyar Dam. So Tamil Nadu has been fighting a legal battle against Kerala since many years to increase the height of the dam. The current height is around 136 feet. This is the current height of the dam. Tamil Nadu wants to extend this to 142 feet. Kerala opposes the increase in height. In fact, Kerala wants the dam to be dismantled. It wants the dam to be dismantled and a new dam to be built, because Kerala's primary concern is about the safety of the region, safety of the people, because there is a real risk that the dam could breach. But Tamil Nadu has provided technical evidence to the Supreme Court. because Tamil Nadu had approached the Supreme Court on this matter, showing the safety of the dam, establishing the safety of the dam, at least for the time being. So in previous rulings, in 2006, in 2014, the Supreme Court had ruled in favor of Tamil Nadu government. The Supreme Court had ruled in favor of Tamil Nadu, allowing Tamil Nadu to continue operating the dam, and it had even allowed the increase of the height of the dam to 142 feet. But Kerala is against it. Kerala is trying to drag its feet. It's trying to block the project by raising concerns about dam safety. So both sides have a genuine concern here. Tamil Nadu is concerned about water availability. Kerala is concerned about the safety of the dam. What if the dam collapses? What if it causes a devastating disaster which will affect the people of Kerala? So these are genuine concerns on both the sides. So Supreme Court as of now has ruled in favor of Tamil Nadu, but Kerala has not fulfilled its commitments. Kerala was supposed to allow Tamil Nadu to start with the construction project, but Kerala is blocking it. So a fresh petition has been filed by Tamil Nadu urging for Supreme Court directions to rebuild the dam and extend the height of the dam. So when it comes to the question of dam safety in India, recently an act was passed, the Dam Safety Act. The Dam Safety Act of 2021. So under the Dam Safety Act, two important institutions have been created: the National Committee on Dam Safety and a National Dam Safety Authority. So the National Committee on Dam Safety will have the authority to inspect the dam sites, to come out with dam safety policies, to recommend the regulation of operation of dams, to ensure that dams are operated in a safe and sound manner. The Dam Safety Authority implements those policies and addresses any disputes, any unresolved issues between two states. That is the purpose of the National Dam Safety Authority. Supreme Court right now has ordered that the technical committees under the National Disaster Management Authority, they are supposed to conduct a assessment about the safety and the structure of the dam. These committees, these technical supervisory committees of the National Disaster Management Authority, they have been conducting the groundwork, but Kerala is very firm that it will not allow the increase in height of the dam. It will not allow any such project. Tamil Nadu is very insistent that it has to go ahead with the project in order to meet the water needs of its people. So as of now, Supreme Court has taken the side of Tamil Nadu, but Kerala is opposing it. So it remains a long-standing issue, a never-ending issue. Even though Supreme Court orders are very clear that Tamil Nadu can go ahead while ensuring the safety of the dam, right? Kerala is still not allowing it to happen, and a fresh case has been filed. A fresh legal petition has been filed by Tamil Nadu. So the editorial is saying that, see, both sides have a genuine concern. It can be resolved in an amicable manner through talks, through negotiations. The editorial is urging both state governments to not make this a legal issue, a legal battle, because there could be political elements, vested political interests, who could misuse these sensitive issues to drive emotions of the people and to polarize the people, to turn this into a political issue. Right? For example, water. Right? Anything related to water is a very emotive subject. Easily the masses can be mobilized by misusing the issue of water. For example, look at the Teesta issue in West Bengal, or the Kaveri dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Right? There are many examples to show how water issue can be politicized, how it can be misused by vested political elements. This could harm interstate relations as well. Right? So that is why the editorial is urging Kerala state government and Tamil Nadu state government to not fight legal battles. The ruling of the Supreme Court is already clear. Right? Of course, the long-term view has to be looked at. But at least for the time being, it's clear that Tamil Nadu can go ahead with increasing the height without compromising the safety of the dam. To ensure the safety, there is an act, there are authorities and institutions, there are technical committees which are inspecting the viability of the dam. Right? So editorial is urging both the state governments to allow the process to continue without disrupting each other, and it's urging both governments to not get into a ugly legal battle, because this could be misused by vested political elements. This could unnecessarily create a bad blood between the two friendly states. Is that clear? So that's what we understand from this important editorial. Next, we have an article on page number 15, which I feel is very, very important as far as international relations and even security is concerned. This article is talking about sea drone warfare, the emergence of sea drone warfare. Of late, there have been many examples of the usage of sea drones or unmanned underwater assets which have been used in combat, which have become very lethal when it comes to actual warfare scenarios. If you look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is ongoing, Ukraine has very effectively used underwater drones, remotely piloted boats and other underwater assets to target large Russian vessels. Now this essentially is revolutionizing the world of combat, the world of warfare. I'm sure all of you know how aerial drones have already revolutionized aerial combat, right? When it comes to precision strikes or surgical strikes, when it comes to intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, and even targeted strikes on land, or even engaging in aerial battle. Aerial drones have already changed the very face of warfare. The US, from many years, almost 20 plus years, has been effectively using armed drones like the Predator drones, the Reaper drones, to carry out strikes against terrorist camps in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in many other parts of the world. Other countries like Israel, even India, right, they've all built an entire fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, or aerial drones, which are used for a variety of military purposes. It could be for intelligence gathering, surveillance and reconnaissance, target acquisition, or even to launch armed strikes or targeted strikes by using rockets and missiles, right? So we understood how aerial drones have already changed the face of combat on land, on the air. But when it comes to underwater, right, in the water-based domain, the maritime domain, sea-based drones or underwater drones are also revolutionizing the very face of conflict. And Ukraine is a leading example. See, Russia has a superior navy any day compared to Ukraine. Russia has few aircraft carriers, it has nuclear-powered submarines, it has a large fleet of warships, from minesweepers to missile destroyers to frigates. But Ukraine has delivered a crippling hit to Russian Navy, especially in the Black Sea. Over the last 2 years of conflict between these two countries, Ukraine, despite being a weaker power, has effectively used these cheap, rudimentary underwater drones. They are basically submersible vessels or modified boats, modified submarine-like underwater bodies, right, which are remotely controlled, remotely piloted. And they are fitted with explosives or with sensors or cameras. So the ones fitted with cameras and sensors, they collect intelligence, they collect data, right? They can be helpful in reconnaissance, in patrolling. But once fitted with explosives, right, if you use them to target an enemy warship or an enemy naval base, it can actually deliver a crippling hit. And Ukraine has successfully sunk several Russian ships. Imagine a sea-based drone, which is made in such a rudimentary manner, will hardly cost you a few $1,000s. Imagine such a rudimentary underwater drone taking down a multi-million-dollar ship or a submarine. Russian Navy has lost multiple warships to such underwater drone attacks led by the Ukrainian special forces and Ukrainian intelligence. So this highlights the role of underwater drones in the future of warfare. This is going to define the future of maritime combat. So article here is talking about the plans, the preparedness of the US Navy. The article is specific to the kind of assets that US Navy is looking to procure. On one hand, in the Department of Defense of the United States, also called the Pentagon, there are few who are supporting sea drone based warfare to focus on building a large fleet of sea drones or underwater drones, which can be used for targeted offensive operations, that is essentially armed drones. And they're also looking at a fleet of unarmed drones, which can be used for intelligence gathering, surveillance, etc. But there is another section within the Pentagon which don't support the sea drone program, but they are allocating more funds for traditional warships, large megaships, aircraft carriers, and missile destroyers, etc. Because see, on one hand, there is a traditional military-industrial complex. There are private defense contractors in the US who already are sitting on billions of dollars worth of contracts to build massive warships, aircraft carriers that will cost billions of dollars. So they're not going to give up those contracts, because this is about the survivability of the business of these defense industries. Right? They have very strong lobbies which act on their behalf, and they're trying to nudge the US government, the US Department of Defense, to favor the construction of large ships, aircraft carriers, even when the world is showing a clear change in trend towards sea drone warfare. Reports show that China, the Chinese Navy, is already building up a fleet of underwater drones, both armed drones and unarmed drones. And imagine if such drones are used in a swarm attack. We have seen reports of aerial drones. Even the commercially available drones have been retrofitted or remodeled, and they are used to carry out these swarm attacks, where 30, 40, 50 or 100 drones can be used to swarm a target and attack a particular target. Imagine this happening underwater, using cheap and hundreds of underwater drones to launch an attack on enemy naval bases or enemy ships, or even to establish a naval blockade in critical shipping channels. So China is already building those capabilities. So the article is talking about this divide within the US Department of Defense, where some of them are supporting an expansion of sea drone warfare program by learning lessons from Ukraine. They are promoting the production of sea drone warfare, the development, the design, production of underwater drones, which are cheaper, which can be produced on a mass scale. You can produce hundreds of them in a year and deploy them into active combat. But there are others who are against it, who are still supporting the traditional approach of funding only large warships, aircraft carriers, and the big vessels. So this is something which is valuable for India as well. What's happening in the US right now regarding should we spend more on underwater drones or should we spend on traditional warships? This could be a question India will also face very soon, right? Indian military establishment would already be considering the consequences of Ukraine pioneering the usage of underwater drones, cheap underwater drones, to destroy large warships. So what's the point of building large warships when a cheap drone can destroy it? Right? The very nature of warfare is changing because of these small miniature underwater assets, and the same has happened already with regard to aerial drones. Look at how effectively Houthis have used drones to disrupt shipping in the Red Sea. Reports also show that Houthis also, the Houthi rebels of Yemen, even they are trying to pioneer underwater drones. They have already used underwater drones to target commercial ships, but they have not succeeded. They have missed the targets. So these developments in Ukraine, in the Black Sea, and led by Houthis in the Red Sea, it has pushed US to rethink its approach towards naval preparedness, naval procurement. Reports show that China is already building a fleet of underwater drones. Even India is working on similar technologies. Now, can you find out the underwater drone project which DRDO is working on? Right? And please mention that in the comment section below. I'm not talking about the aerial drones. I'm not talking about Rustam or Nishan. Those are aerial drones. India is also working on underwater remotely piloted vehicles which can be used for such operations in actual warfare. So please read more about this. It's a very interesting topic and a very important topic, both for GS Paper 2 and also for GS Paper 3. Now let's look at the prelims section. Let's take a quick look at this article from page number 7 related to environment ecology and science and technology. It's again a very interesting article if you ask me. The article is referring to a particular orangutan in a protected area in the Southeast Asia region, right? You can see the image of that orangutan as well. This orangutan had injured itself in the wild. You can see the injury on its face over here, right? It was a deep injury, a deep wound it had suffered from. But researchers observed that this orangutan used few leaves which has medical properties, and it applied the juices to the wounded area, and within few days or a couple of weeks, the wound had completely healed. You can see the before and after image. Essentially, a orangutan had self-medicated itself. Now, this is groundbreaking. Let me tell you why. Because the medicinal leaves that the orangutan used, it's widely known in Southeast Asia, across Indonesia, Malaysia, in these areas, in the forested areas. The native people know the medicinal properties of the leaves. So it's part of the traditional medicine of this region. But the fact that an animal was able to figure out the medicinal properties, apply it, and heal itself raises very interesting anthropological questions. If animals also can learn, pick up such self-medication, self-treating skills, the question is, when did humans really begin self-treatment, self-medication? Which could provide answers to the very origin of medicine, right? Or can other animals do the same? Do they have such knowledge? Do they have this somehow inherent ability to pick up medicinal herbs or leaves in the forest and heal themselves, treat themselves? And an orangutan has shown that. It's a wild orangutan, by the way, right? So the point for prelims here is, one, it raises an evolutionary question, right? If orangutans, if an ape-like species can show such skills, when did humans pick up this skill? That's a basic question researchers are trying to address. Next, the conservation status of orangutans. Where are they found? See, orangutans are native to Southeast Asia. They are primarily found in Indonesia and Malaysia. There are 3 subspecies of orangutans. Please note it down. You have the Sumatran orangutan, found only on the Sumatran island of Indonesia. The Bornean orangutan, found in the Borneo rainforests of Indonesia and Malaysia. And finally, the Tapanuli orangutan. These are the 3 subspecies, and all 3 are listed as critically endangered. That's why the point is important. All the 3 subspecies are recognized by the IUCN on its red list as critically endangered. Very few remain in the wild. They are one of the most intelligent subspecies under the ape family, right? They are very timid creatures as well. The numbers have gone down drastically. They enjoy protection under the CITES Convention as well. They are listed under Appendix 1 of the CITES Convention, right? The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. It prohibits and regulates the trade of endangered species and their products. So it enjoys a very high level of conservation status because of the threat level it faces. So it's a highly threatened species. So that's what we learned from this article. Coming to the last article for today, on page number 14, we have this article related to a diplomatic issue that has broken out between Germany and Russia. Germany has accused Russia of launching a state-sponsored cyber attack that has targeted many politicians, German politicians, from the ruling party. That's the development. German authorities have reported that several leading politicians from the ruling party of the German government have been targeted with a cyber attack campaign which allegedly has been state-sponsored by Russia. German investigators are pointing fingers at a threat group, at a threat actor, which is popularly known as Apt 28 or Fancy Bear. This is a cyber threat actor, a cyber threat group, which is known to countries, intelligence agencies, and even to cybersecurity firms. See, Russia has a military intelligence agency called the GRU. It's one of the most formidable intelligence agencies of the world. It's a military intelligence unit of Russia. So according to reports, the GRU is involved in such cyber war, cyber espionage programs, and they sponsor non-state actors and other non-state groups to launch such cyber campaigns against the rivals of Russia, against the enemy states of Russia. So there was a similar cyber threat actor sponsored by the GRU in the past, which allegedly disrupted the American presidential elections in 2016 and 2020. Ukraine has suffered from crippling cyber attacks, which has been linked with the same group of threat actors who are tied with Russian intelligence agency GRU. So Apt 28 or Fancy Bear, right? It's a term, it's a name given to a non-state cyber group. It's a non-state actor. It's an anonymous entity, a cyber security threat, right? Which specializes in advanced cyber weapons, which can engage in cyber espionage, cyber influence operations, or even cyber warfare operations on behalf of the Russian state. Just like Pakistan sponsors terrorist groups against India, right, and wages a proxy war, in a similar way, Russia is known to use non-state proxies, non-state cyber threat actors like Fancy Bear to launch cyber attacks against target countries. Even China does the same. Rather, most countries, they would do the same, right? If they have to engage in such cyber espionage programs, or if they want to collect sensitive information through a cyber attack, or if they want to wage a cyber war against a country, most countries, their intelligence agencies would sponsor non-state actors, such non-state cyber threat actors, to launch these attacks on their behalf, so that the attack is never traced back to the government and to their intelligence agencies. So please know the name Fancy Bear and Apt 28. UPSC might ask you a very simple question. What is Apt 28 or Fancy Bear, seen frequently in news? What is it related to? It's basically related to the world of cybersecurity. It's a non-state cyber threat actor linked with Russian intelligence agencies, and it's alleged that this cyber group has launched many cyber attacks against Western countries, European countries, US, etc. So that's what we learned from this important article. So this brings my discussion to an end. Please take down the practice questions for today. These are the two practice questions. Please try and write an answer and post your answers in the comment section below. So that is it for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session, learned some important details, and if you did benefit from the session, do let me know in the comments, and do press the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.